live now.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 12th. We are back after a lovely town meeting break. This is the Senate Government Operations Committee, and we're going to take our first testimony on S96, an act relating to privatization contracts. And we have to start, Deb, come on up, Deb. We're going to start by introducing the committee to you and to everybody in the room and on the screen. Because a lot of you haven't been in our committee before, so you all know who you're talking to. As I introduce myself, and I'm Senator Ruth Hardy, and I represent the Addison district.
I'm Olivia Parker, the committee assistant. Senator Tanya Dubowski, I represent Chittenden Central District.
Hi, I'm Rebecca White, and I represent the Windsor County District.
Bob Norris, Franklin County, and the town of Elbert in Great Elk County.
Ken Watson, Washington District.
And we've worked together for a long time on the committee. Allison works at Windsor County District. It's great to see you. Because we don't get to see that often, but on this issue, always.
Yeah. So, thanks for being with us. If you want to just introduce yourself for the record, and then just let us know your thoughts on the bill. Again, this is the first testimony we've gotten on it, so if you have background information, probably would be helpful for context as well.
Okay. So I'm Debbie Goodmore. I'm the Director of Purchasing and Contracting for the Department of Buildings and General Services under the Agency Administration.
Great, thank you.
So I'll go ahead and get started if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I am bringing a little bit of background, more context than anything, and then I will share, once I do that, some thoughts that I do have on this. So currently, and that's as of today, there are no current privatization contracts. So the state has none recorded within our vision system, our financial management system, where we record on. And so currently, privatization contracts are considered a contract for services valued at $25,000 or more, which is the same or substantially similar to and in lieu of services previously provided in whole or in part by permanent classified employees, and which results in a reduction in force of at least one permanent classified employee, the elimination of a vacant position of an employee covered by collective bargaining agreement. So that is currently the definition of a privatization contract. And then at a high level, the process identified under Administrative Bulletin 3.5, and that bulletin is the bulletin issued by the Secretary of Administration that governs the general policy around bidding and contracting within the state. And from a process perspective, no agency may enter into a privatization contract unless it is first notified the Commissioner of Human Resources. And the work is substantially the same. I'm sorry. I should just speak and not read from this, but
It's all good.
has first notified the Commissioner of Human Resources and substantially worked with the DHR to follow the procedure specified in 3 VSA 343, which is the privatization contract procedure. So there's two kind of highlighted, there's a number of steps involved in the process, but I'm really going to highlight two. The first being the agency shall be required to notify the Vermont State Employees Association, so VSEA, of its intent to enter into a privatization contract 35 days prior to the beginning of any open bidding process, including an informal bidding process. So whether it's publicly bid or what we refer to as a simplified bid, where we may only invite, minimum of 3, then for solicit 3 firms, you still have to notify DHR in that respect. And yes, the agency must also demonstrate the use of the accounting process specified again in 3 VSA 343, that the proposed contract will result in a cost savings to the state of at least 10% compared to the cost of having service provided by classified state employees. DHR approval of any proposed privatization contract shall be required in addition to any approval required based on any monetary amount or waiver or any other requirement. So DHR is always has to approve privatization contract. So again, at a high level, just a little bit of background definition and identified a couple points of what's involved in the process currently for privatization. Now the S-96, we do have some concerns with the bill as drafted. I'm highlighting a few, but I'm not mentioning all of our concerns, I'm just highlighting a few of those. One, it makes the process more complicated. An example of that is the creation of a panel to review and assess compliance with statute to include VDOL, the auditor, and the CDA assigned. It includes grants, where previously it just focused on contracts. There might be potentially federal implications. It's increasing the savings threshold from 10% to 20%. It also eliminates the requirement for a reduction in force of at least one permanent classified employee. And I'm also noting that it crosses the line into private companies by dictating wages paid for each position. It shall not be less than the average step of the grade under which the comparable state employee position is paid. Cost of health, dental, and vision insurance plans for every employee pursuant to the contract at least equal to the percentage paid by the state for state employees. The health insurance plan described in the bid should provide coverage to the employee and the employee's spouse and dependent child benefiting. And then it also requires the contractor to submit quarterly payroll records to the state, listing the name, address, hourly work, and the hourly wage paid for each employee. And I have a note here that, I'm a state employee, that is public information, that is not typical of a private sector. So those are my general comments.
Do you have your testimony in writing? Did you submit that?
I don't, but I'm happy to provide it if you'd like.
That would be great if you're able to, and if you need to add more to it or whatever, that's fine. But if you're able to submit that to Olivia so we can post it, it would be helpful. And that goes for everyone who's testifying, just to make sure we have written testimony. If we were to move forward with the bill, do you have suggested changes that you would like to see in the bill from the perspective of the BGF perspective?
It would be significant, so it wouldn't just be a tweak, it would be significant.
Okay. Great. You have questions, Senator Beagles?
Yeah, I have just a sort of process question. So under the current law, how are those privatization contracts held accountable to the requirements of the statute?
I'd have to go through the process. There's a procedure as far as accountability. I think there's currently a panel. Let me get back to you. I don't have them. I don't have them.
Okay, no, that's okay. Thank you.
I would just say in general, we don't currently have any. So when we do have one, I will say that I'm the first one to look at what is that process again. It's very detailed, it's outlined, and we do follow that currently. But it's a tool that we use infrequently. I'll say it's a tool that we like to have, but it's rare that it is utilized. And I think the fact that we have no contracts now that are considered privatization speaks to that.
Thanks.
Senator Clarkson?
So Deb, you've now worked at BGS for how long?
I dare say 26 years.
Yeah, as long as I've been here. I'm just curious, do you know, sort of just roughly, how many, what has been privatized while you've been at BGS? Because some things happen. I think good for this committee to get a sense of how many things have been privatized, let's say in the last, what X number of years, but also what stand out to you as things we have privatized.
I will say the only one I can recall and remember is the workers' compensation group that was outsourced or privatized. Outsourced. But that's the only one I recall.
Thank you very much. We're gonna move on because we only have a short amount of time.
I will get this to you.
Cross over.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that'd be great. Thanks, Deb, so
Thank
much. Matt? You missed our introductions, I think, but
Oh, okay.
oh, you were, okay.
I'm very fortunate to know all of you.
Yes, I was gonna say, I think you know all the same way.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come in. My name is Matt Musgrave. I'm with the Associated General Contractors of Vermont. Tell you a little bit about, I know that you all know who I am, but maybe some of the folks out there in cyberspace don't know, maybe folks in the building. We're a trade association. We represent construction companies, contractors working for the state of Vermont, not only in the public sector, but in the private sector. We provide industry-specific training in our office for the Office of Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, as well as for Mine Safe Health Administration, which is MSHA. We also do other specific trainings like things like fall protection, confined spaces, blueprint reading, leadership training. And we've even put together wellness program trainings for safety supervisors to help deal with mental health challenges as well as opioid challenges at the job site. So we do a fair amount of training to a cadre of employees in the state of Vermont that ranges between 15 and 20,000 people. Right now, we have about 16,000 people that work either for my member companies or in other outfits that are contractor related pieces. We are very proud to say that if you look at our job advertisements, that we pay above and beyond the Vermont livable wage with great benefits to our employees. They have great lifestyles. We really value them, and we put them ahead of most of what we do because that is one of the most finite resources that we have in the state of Vermont right now. And we discovered that was, our mission had to expand to mental health and opioid recovery and bringing people inclusively into the workforce because the shortages exist there. So we're proud to say that we're accomplishing those goals. I think a lot of people would like to meet in terms of providing a good lifestyle for workers of Vermont. Our members perform contracts in addition to the private sector for Vermont's Agency of Transportation, Buildings and General Services, as well as the Agency of Natural Resources. We also work with the prison systems and healthcare systems and everything else above and beyond. Basically anything with a brick, mortar or steel in it, we probably are touching it at one point in the state. So the ultimate benefit of using contractor services, and I'm speaking just to my industry, I know that there's other contractors that are out there, and the definition today of privatization is a little bit different than the definition the bill seeks for privatization, and that's why we're here today. I don't generally think a lot of the conditions of this, particularly a 10% threshold, we're the ones with the fleets of the equipment, and they're very, very expensive. But the ultimate goal of using a contractor service is to mitigate risk for taxpayers in addition to filling gaps that state employees are unable to fill. It's not about replacing people. And I don't want anyone to think that the motive of AGC is to replace any of our state employees. In fact, we work alongside state employees on a daily basis, and we value those relationships. So I don't want anything I say here today to be construed of anything less than that value of those individuals that we work with. When requests for proposals go out, contractors pick up all of the risk after the award. That includes inflation, workforce development, and in my business, unimagined obstacles like environmental challenges that change the overall cost of these projects significantly. During the 2021 construction season, Vermont spent about $850 million in their transportation program. And after surveying members who were calling in upset, worried about the massive inflation that we were dealing with during 2021, we not estimated, calculated based on actual reports over $80 million in overrides that our members had to deal with out of pocket. There was no escalation agreement and there was no money in the state of Vermont to replace that. So these contractors picked up that risk during that time of high inflation. And that's one of the benefits for rewarding and maintaining a healthy group of contractors that are out there. So the hardest part of this testimony is, I just have to say this next sentence, AGC opposes S96 in all of its parts. And we request that the bill be passed over for consideration. This is a perennial bill that we're familiar with, and in prior formats, it seemed to simply attempt to change that threshold from 10% to 20%. But this newest version has provisions in it that would upend state contracting as the way that we're familiar with it today. And it's already tries to, the bill seems to seek to manipulate programs and processes like Davis-Bacon wage reporting and Vermont's prevailing wage, things that we have that are already working, that are in place, that are based on actual wages that are being paid in the state. At the core of the bill, it seeks to retain work that's going out to privatization contracts for state employees. At this point, it seems a little bit challenging to hear that, knowing what the cadre of folks are that are out there. And I don't say this again with any ill will, but currently right now you have over 1,000 unfilled positions within state government. And they range anything from people that are janitors all the way up to engineers and everything in between. Currently, if you go out to the job board for the state of Vermont, there only have 400 advertised jobs, which means that they've walked away from advertising 600 jobs that are open seats right now. So so we understand that. I think proponents of the bill know that as well, because you can see in the definition section, it actually removes the clause in that first section of the definition of privatization contract that specifically required there to be a state employee in place that was being misplaced for that contract. So by taking that clause out, you're completely changing what the definition of the privatization contract is, and now you're including my industry. So it's not just my industry, it's healthcare, technology. There's a number of different entities that are out there, some of which the state has never even contemplated having employees fill those positions. And those people don't, as of now, have a voice at this table. So
Is it hot in here?
it's a little hot, and I get nervous. I'm surrounded.
I was going to say,
I did.
that's
I am in the hot seat. So yeah, this time of year when you have the sun come in and so essentially we have a challenge with that major change. It brings us into something that we weren't necessarily a part of before, because especially in the transportation world, we have set up that system. AOT doesn't employ tons of maintenance people. It is what it is. They've set up the system. But with this change, that definition, now we're a part of it. And the next part of it, it makes it even further challenging for us, because we have lived in a world that's highly negotiated with Davis-Bacon and the Vermont prevailing wage. Both of those things, and I would encourage you to have someone from the Civil Rights Division at VTrans come in and talk a little bit about what Davis-Bacon really is, because Davis-Bacon is a self-fulfilling prophecy of increasing wages.
Yeah.
And that's the system that we've been following, because what that does is it takes not only our local statistics, but other statistics from the area to figure out what employers are being paid. Senator Bobski asked the question, how do we ensure that people are being paid at those rates? Well, you have to submit for Davis-Bacon reporting all of the wages that you're paying out to every single person that's classified on that project that you have there. That's audited by the state, it's audited by the federal government. Similar processes occur within VGS, and we talked about auditing last year. So VGS at any time can call up one of my members that's doing work for them and demand to see the pay receipts and payroll information for people that are engaged in their projects. So that's there. And that's based on a real calculus of what people are being paid within the marketplace. Now, this bill seeks to tie the wages of these positions, classifications, and these contracts to the state negotiated wage that's in the union contract. And that's fine, except for we're contemplating wages, particularly in my industry, they may not even exist. So we're essentially what we would be doing is we'd be going out of state and potentially picking up out of state wages, which aren't relevant to what we're doing here. So Davis-Bacon prevailing wage are based on what's actually happening here. It's based on surveys that occur on a timely basis and get that out the door. Another thing that's important to note with Vermont's prevailing wage, this bill seems to attach those fringe benefits to healthcare and vision, et cetera. So with Vermont's prevailing wage, there's actually a fringe benefit requirement. I believe it's 41% of the wage be paid to the employee. Now, if the employee's spouse happens to have healthcare coverage, that actually could be a financial incentive to that employee rather than coverage for healthcare. So why would we consider taking that away? So the next part is where it gets even more complicated for me, is that the inclusion of these additional steps under this bill will really make it challenging for contractors to want to participate. Right now, we currently have a process that is set up. And again, when we talk about, I just want to bring us back, because when we talk about privatization contracts, it's changing under the definition of this. So it brings all of my people in. So one of the things that we talk about a lot, we meet with Buildings General Services quite frequently to talk about the delivery of those services. How can we improve members? How can they improve what they're doing? The most common complaint that we're hearing right now is that the RFP goes out, a contractor responds, they win, and then there's a 30-day period that they might not get any approval from the AG's office on, that they have to wait. During that period of time, 1 month's time can make a difference whether there's any profit in that project or not, because the price of goods right now, because of the supply chain and because of inflation, we've got general inflation down. I think general inflation's now, I think, below 3%, but that's not for all products, particularly building materials that are in short supply. So we look at those delays, and the thought of adding another jurisdictional delay to that process that already works. Someone's saying it doesn't work. Maybe someone's saying we're not seeing by and large that it's not working. So why would we add additional pieces to that? The other part of those additional challenges, not just that we're now bringing the auditor. And remember last year I said, I'm wondering what the auditor is up to. Well, we're starting to see some more. So, you know, we're bringing the auditor in, we're going to have a party. Steve will be there, and we're going to take more time to figure this out. Meanwhile, the prices of those goods and services continue to be going up. So then all of a sudden my cost as a contractor may go up, and I might exceed that 20% that you put in there. That brings in the absolute worst part of the bill. And I'm just saying this nicely in jest, but
Exactly, I mean.
I absolutely mean it. No one's going to bid on and I'm saying this with absolute confidence. No one's gonna bid on a job if you tell them, I'm gonna award you this job, allow the Attorney General's office to come in after you've been awarded the job. You have the delay between the award of the job, deal with inflation, it puts you over the 20% mark, and then they can come and call the contract back. That doesn't seem, I can't imagine a single contractor that would perform a project like that, knowing that they would have to buy the goods, buy the materials, buy the labor, show up, perform the duty, and then get sent home. That's just a non-starter. Can we just go home now? So with that said, I'm just asking you to please show your support to the good service providers that have continued to build Vermont by opposing S96. Additionally, you'll be telling our 16,000 workers that you appreciate what they do, when in many cases what they are performing dangerous jobs that can kill them, so that we all can stay safe. So please don't pass this bill.
That's quite an ending. I just have to say. Do you have your testimony in writing? Okay.
I do, and I submit it.
That would be great. One quick question, because I want to make sure we have time for everybody's testimony. So go ahead, Senator Clarkson.
No, I was just gonna say, Matt, you referred to, and I think makes sense, is that the state government can provide all the expertise and all the jobs possible that the state needs to have done. So I'd appreciate it if you give us a picture of what, you know, just recently, what jobs your crowd has filled that we don't supply.
Oh, so what was
Just
it?
illustrate it for us.
July 13th, I believe Richard Wabi, my boss, and I were sitting, look at the July 13th, it was sometime in that first 2 weeks of July. We were watching a river go through Montpelier.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, we looked at each other and we saw the river start coming up over the edges. And that river actually took over my building, and a few of you have been in my building.
That's right.
Okay, so we got.
Why we had a new building.
So what happened? Our members got together, put together a clearinghouse. We got contractors, CDL operators, equipment companies, people all over the state of Vermont came together and put together the largest force within hours that came down and started moving aggregates, moving building materials, and moving earth to shore up our street lines, to shore up our roads so that ambulances can get over there. So we were there. That's your healthy group of contractors. They are able to show up when there's a problem, but they're also there to show up when you want to build a beautiful building.
Do you have backers?
Do I have what?
Backers.
What is a vector?
Oh, no, you just failed. A very important piece of equipment that all our towns would like to borrow.
Yeah, and if you have one of those.
I do not know what that is.
Oh.
They actually, one of the
Go
first
find out.
things.
Somebody's yelling at you right now from the screen,
So I
about
just,
what a Vactor is.
part of my training occurred when they put the new statue on top of
Oh,
the
yeah.
building here. Yeah, and we had one of our members brought their crane down, and
Oh, I got a picture of it in Jam and Statue.
my boss said to come down and make sure that everything was going well. But the one rule that he told me then that occurs to this day is I am not allowed to touch any of that stuff. It's literally not what I'm supposed to be visible in.
There's
All right.
only.
Find out what a Vactor is and come back to us with the answer. Thanks, Matt.
Yes,
I
thank you.
appreciate it. I'm sorry to rush you at the end. We're just-
No, and I appreciate you
It's-
making.
You know
the
what
time.
week it is, so we're trying to get through a lot this week, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Christopher.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll be really quick, trust me.
No, you're fine.
You gotta control the second.
Yeah.
Where's your Hartford hat?
My what?
My Hartford hat.
I'll tell you what, my.
I know, I love your
It
pen.
only cost me thousands. So for the record, Chris Newby, I'm the president of Professional Firefighters Vermont. I also work down in Hartford. 30, going on 32 years as a captain on the fire department. Getting close to retire, thank God. So I'm just gonna give you like a high level overview of privatization in the fire service, EMS. That's kind of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
We don't see it a lot in Vermont. However, it is prevalent around the country. You see it a lot in the Midwest, especially out in the West. You see it a lot with unincorporated villages that don't have a real structural form of government. So a lot of times these services are outsourced. Sometimes my members, when we're on the IFF, my big national organization, their members may get the task, sometimes they don't. Some of the issues they've seen with it is one, that the wages tend to be lower. No ways around it. They tend to pay a little less. They certainly don't get the same benefits. That's why I think that this bill is important, at least if they're gonna bid on something. That whoever that gets that private contract, be it for whatever in the state, that at least they're comparable wages and they're getting comparable benefits. Like I said, one of those we see a lot is they get misclassified. A lot of times they get hired as a quote unquote contractor, especially out in the west for fire season, California, Oregon, that area, Idaho, all those. So they'll hire you for a season, pay you like $150, $200 a day, depending on what you're doing. Not realizing that, hey, it's good money for some people, but then when they get hurt, they're not necessarily covered by workers' comp. So those are issues that we deal with. That's why from the IFF standpoint, we're kind of opposed to contracts unless, or at least with this bill, it would meet some certain criteria. That they have the insurance, that they do make comparable wages, okay? I mean, other than that, I'll leave it up to that. We see it with EMS also. One of the other things we see too is a lot of these private companies, when they do get a contract in a municipality, it's unincorporated, they tend to have a high turnover rate, so you're not keeping necessarily well-trained, well-knowledgeable staff. Because they'll use that as a stepping stone to go to a more, a more structured organization. I can give you a brief example in this state, so, the Vermont Air Guard. Okay, they are state employees. That is something that I'm not advocating, but that's something that some airports would outsource. Manchester Airport, for instance, that's a private company that gives fire protection down there, Centurion Corporation. I know a lot of people that work there that have since come to the municipal side because of better pay, better benefits, retirement, and all that. So that's just something to keep on your radar when you look at that bill. So we stand in support of this, with our fellow union guys that, hey, you know, if they're gonna privatize it, at least maintain the wages. Make sure that they're accountable for that, make sure that they are giving them the benefits that they need, so. So I'll keep it brief, because I don't get a short
You did a
time,
great
so.
job. Are your people, they're municipal employees, right? So do you have members who are state employees?
So, we do not, so we're municipal and we're also, we just took on Charlotte, which is a private non-for-profit, they're gonna be what we call an industrial, local and I.
Oh.
Because they are a private non-for-profit corporation,
In Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we just organized them with the National Labor Relations Board and we're going through the process of getting chartered with the IFF, so they will be coming on with 7 members. But everything else in the state is municipal,
Right,
so.
okay, okay.
And we don't, like I said, we don't see that a lot here, but that's not to mean
Yeah.
that it can't happen. I know from basically Wisconsin on west,
Yeah,
you see it more and more prevalent in a lot of the areas that deal with wildfires. The federal government will contract and they come in, and one of the last things that they've seen of that, just to float it out there, one of the issues they've seen with private companies is they tend to be for the insurance companies, which they've had issues in California in particular, where they'll come into an area that's wildfire, protect this house, but not this
Oh,
one,
yeah.
because they didn't pay. So I know this bill probably doesn't look at that from that context, but that's one of the things they've seen out in that area in California and the west with wildfires, that, okay, this company comes in and it gives the homeowners a false sense of security, saying, hey, look, there's these fire trucks here, why aren't you protecting my house? Well, you didn't pay. So those are
Wow.
kind of the high level concerns we have with privatization, that does happen, I'm not saying it happens here, I get that, but that's always one of those things we gotta radar.
okay. So just to make sure I'm clear, you're supportive of, the bill would impact you and your people, but you're supportive of it as a sort of in brotherhood.
Yeah, so I'm supporting it
Okay.
because I think that's good. I like reading that through when they approached me a couple weeks ago that at least like the wages, I agree 100% of that. I think that if you're gonna kind of on and off record, so my wife works at Dartmouth Hitchcock now. They've outsourced a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, a lot lower rate,
Mhm.
a lot lower benefits. And that, to me, that has an effect within the community down the road.
Yeah.
You know, you're forcing people that had secure jobs now to go, there was once done by Hitchcock, now they gotta go work for this other company. We come in a lot cheaper. The
Mhm.
reason they do is because they're paying them help $4 or $5 an hour less.
Yeah.
Which has that ripple effect down the road. So that's why we stand in support of this bill. If they're gonna bid, at least keep that.
Got it, okay.
All right,
Great, thank you so much, Christopher. And do you have,
these are just notes, but I can type them for
that'd be
me.
great, if you could send them
Sure.
to Olivia, so we have it on the record, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Sharzad? Hi,
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Sherazad Habibi or Cher Habibi. I'm the Research and Policy Director for In the Public Interest. In the Public Interest is a national nonprofit research and policy center that studies privatization and responsible contracting. And I'm here today to speak in support of S96. The bill incorporates several widely identified best practices for responsible government contracting. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few of those key provisions. First, by requiring that contractors compensate workers at rates comparable to public sector workers, governments ensure that contractors compete on whether they can offer quality services through increased efficiencies instead of undercutting each other in price by slashing workers' wages and benefits. By ensuring that contractors' promises of cost savings do not come from wage reductions, governments can preserve family-supporting jobs, which is good for workers, good for communities, good for the state economy. Public sector jobs have long played a role in growing the middle class. However, in privatization contracts, contractors may cut labor costs in an effort to increase profit margins, eroding middle and working class jobs. And public dollars going toward contractors to perform public work should fulfill the goal of strengthening our economy and building the middle class. In our research, we have repeatedly found that low road government contracting can set off a downward spiral in which reduced worker wages and benefits can hurt the local economy and overall stability of middle and working class communities. And this dynamic is underscored by academic research. There's a study by Daphne Greenwood, who's an economist at the University of Colorado, which shows how declines in workers' wages due to outsourcing means less money to spend in their local communities. Lower wages mean that workers spend less in local retail, local restaurants, and other establishments, negatively impacting local businesses. And she also found that lower wages mean that local and state governments collect less in sales, income, property, and other types of taxes. So in short, less money is flowing to the local economy, and more money is routed to corporations. S96 further ensures that the state does business with high road contractors by requiring that contractors that receive state contracts do not have records of breaking labor, employment discrimination, health and safety, environmental, and other important types of laws. There's research that shows that governments that review information about contractors' track records and use this information to identify responsible bidders report that contracts result in better outcomes. So higher quality, more reliable services, reduced cost overruns and project delays, and reduced compliance and litigation costs. And then additionally, by requiring the 20% cost savings from contracts, the bill ensures that it is financially advantageous for the state to contract out a given public good or service. Other states will also rely on cost savings requirements. For example, the state of Maryland requires that contracts provide a 20% cost savings, and they include both direct and indirect costs in that calculation. Other states such as Massachusetts and Maine also require the demonstration of some level of cost savings before a proposed contract can be approved. So this just really, this provision helps ensure that contracting out a public service or function results in quantifiable savings to the state. And then lastly, the bill contains several important provisions that ensure that the state can hold contractors accountable for their promises. So specifically, it ensures that a state panel verifies whether a contract follows state contract law. It also allows the Attorney General to investigate if a contract does not meet the 20% savings threshold. And then if these conditions aren't met, the contract is either canceled or not renewed, depending on the specific deficiency. And these accountability mechanisms are important because there is a broad range of research that shows that public services often do not improve after being contracted out. A central goal for corporate contractors is to maximize profits. So there may be internal pressures to cut corners, such as paying employees less or employing fewer workers or using inferior materials or making programmatic decisions that save on costs but result in diminished quality. It was interesting. There was a 2017 International City County Association survey. And ICMA does these surveys every few years on government's outsourcing kind of behaviors. And the survey showed that the most cited reason for bringing services back in-house after contracting was unsatisfactory service quality, with 54% of governments that insource services reporting that particular reason. So governments should not be locked into contracts with contractors that fail to deliver. And I think that the accountability provisions in the bill help ensure that public money does not fund contracts that fail to deliver on either cost savings or high quality services. So in closing, I'll just reiterate that we support this bill. It incorporates, good practices in government contracting, ensuring that high road contracting, decisions are made and there's accountability in the contracting process. And I've provided this testimony in written format, and there are links and footnotes to some of the studies that I've cited, and I'm happy to pull any of those and send those to the committee if that is helpful. So thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Cher. That was really helpful. And thank you for anticipating my question about the written testimony. It's probably already on our website with the links, I'm assuming. So thank you. I appreciate it. Is there one quick question, anyone? Senator Larson.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't really talk about quality of service being quantified in here, but yet give it as the major reason services come back into government after they've been outsourced. That would be very interesting to see, because I'm not sure we have quality of service in here, do we, as much as the pay? We talk mostly about pay and benefits, but
Yeah, we can, I don't know. We can look into it.
and definitely add it if we don't have it. So
Thank you so much, Cher. Very appreciated.
really,
Thank you.
All right, Steve, you're up next. You want to come on up?
Thank you. I have not provided written testimony yet, but I shall.
But you know what a Vactor is.
I do. Sucks up the water. See, I hope I score points because I was.
Yes, yes.
I don't have one.
sort of,
It's a little more complicated.
I probably could have used one in our office.
A back.
Flooded, but
We can show you photos.
great.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Steve Howard, I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association. And I appreciate you taking the time to take testimony on this bill. I want to start by saying that, well, first of all, I begin by saying what I think is the obvious. And I want to begin just from a traditional standpoint by saying how great it is to be back in my favorite committee. But state employees are the experts in what they do. We've seen them in action. They are the folks who run toward flood, into the snowstorm. They are the folks who are keeping our community safe and who deal with a chronic pattern of understaffing. In the last 8 years, since the beginning of the Scott administration, vacancies in state government have grown by 90%, an unprecedented amount. And the level of contracting, you've heard testimony from the administration that we don't have any privatization contracts. And that's because the law that's currently on the books doesn't meet the definition of what's really happening when it comes to privatization. In the last 26 years, just sitting in here in the room, just considering Senator Clarkson's question, what has been privatized? Well, we have janitorial services that are privatized right now, provided by
right here in the
Janitech.
state house.
Right here, it's all throughout state government. Security in state buildings all throughout the state. The only two buildings that have state employees providing security are the ones that either have the governor or statewide elected officials or cabinet members. If you're a regular state employee, you get a private contractor. If you're an appointed political appointee, you get state security services in those two buildings. So that's an example of privatization. Workers' comp is an example. The mental health system, the system that deals with our youth in our state. Reach up case managers that are doing the exact same work as state employees who are reach up case managers who work for Creative Workforce Solutions in state buildings, not paying rent to the state, doing the exact same work in the Department of Labor and in the Economic Services Division of the Department for Children and Families. We have a whole facility in Mississippi that is providing correctional services that are also substantially similar to the services that are provided by state employees. The healthcare in our correctional facilities, which we read about enormously in the last few months, provided by a private entity. And now the AOT is allowing some roads, some rest and rides and rest areas with private contractors. So you can see that there's a massive amount of privatization that has happened. And there is no current contract that fits the definition. And that's why we're asking to close this massive loophole that exists in the system. I'd also say that what's critical about this bill is the work has to be substantially similar to work that state employees are doing. And state employees do a variety of work. So I was interested in listening to the testimony of the Association of General Commissioners. Well, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that state employees have never paved or built a road. It's not something that we generally do, not that we haven't ever done that. We maintain the roads. So it doesn't really affect his membership in the way I think he described, unless state employees are secretly building roads all over the state and their union doesn't know it. It's possible, I guess, but I don't think it's happening in a way that it would have the kind of impact that he was describing. So I just want to say very quickly, this bill is really about protecting workers, not just in state service. It's protecting workers in the private sector. It's protecting your constituents from exploitation. It's protecting them from, it's really reiterating the sense that Vermonters do not want to save money in their name by exploiting workers. That's just not something that's consistent with Vermont values. They want comparable pay, benefits, and protections like just cause and whistleblower protection. We want to end the race to the bottom. That's really what this bill is fundamentally about. It also provides job security to current state employees. The people who I described earlier, I think this is an issue that you're going to hear from a couple of state employees who I think can say this with more emphasis than I can, but what I do hear from our members is how demoralizing it is to have to do all the work, only to turn over all of your work over to a private contractor who may not service the Vermonters you care about in the same way, because their interest is profit. State employees are focused on public service. And that is the fundamental difference in the approach. This bill also bolsters the power of the union, and it prevents the management and the administration, not just this administration, future administrations, certainly past administrations have done this, from really circumventing the collective bargaining agreement, getting around the union that has been elected by the members to speak for and represent the members and to negotiate on their behalf and protect them in their job. So one might suggest that the number of vacancies at a very high level over an extended period of time and the massive growth in private contractors isn't happening by accident, that perhaps it's a deliberate strategy. And what you might hear from our members is they feel, and your constituents may experience this as well. If you're waiting 3 hours waiting for somebody from economic services to answer the phone, your constituents, Department of Labor example, you see the effect of this ongoing strategy to starve state government using private contractors and keep vacancies really high. $57 million in vacancy savings in the governor's budget. $57 million, an unprecedented amount. That's not happening by accident. From my humble opinion, and certainly from the opinion of our members. And then lastly, I would just say, as you heard earlier, this is really about protecting your constituents from contractors that either don't save the money they said they would, like the private contract that we have for workers' comp in the first year. Their savings was 7%, they committed to 10%.
Yeah.
And then nobody's looking from that point on to see if they're keeping their commitments. It's also making sure that these contractors aren't bad actors, that they're not discriminating against their employees, that they have safe workplaces, that they're living up to the standards that we would set, the Vermonters would set for their workers. So those are just a few of the thoughts that our members would have in support of this bill. And I think you'll hear from John and from Leona that this, for our members, is our number one priority. We have seen just this massive strategy to privatize state services happening all across state government. And we think it's wrong because we don't think you should privatize on the backs of workers. This bill does not say you cannot have a contract. And certainly in an emergency, you could have a contract. This doesn't say you can't have a contract. It's just saying you ought to be a good actor. You have to treat your employees well, and you ought not to be moving this work out of a bargaining unit for a contract that the governor signed. So that's our humble testimony.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Senator Vygotsky has a question.
Yeah, so you listed multiple places that have been privatized sort of with this loophole. Are they held accountable in any way if they don't go through the official privatization process? Or are they able to be privatized through this loophole that would be closing and then just do whatever they want?
So that would be a good question to the administration. I'm not aware of a process that holds them accountable. Specifically, that looks at each contract. I think there are provisions. Initially, the attorney general does have to review contracts, and the auditor in the current statute does have the ability to review contracts, mostly. So that may be considered accountability. But as you heard the administration say, none of those private services that are being provided are considered privatization under the statute. So we have this argument all the time. It is possible that with a massive number of vacant positions, 90%, and with the use of private entities to provide substantially similar services, that we are depressing the wages of state employees, and we are not competitive in the marketplace, and that's why we're not filling these vacancies. In addition to a whole other hour-long testimony I could give to you about the management culture of state government, under this current, situation that we're in, that is a major reason why we aren't filling those positions.
No, and I understand that in our current privatization contract statute, there is a mechanism for accountability, but these privatized services that you listed don't go through that process because they're exploiting this loophole. Therefore, not held to that accountability.
That's
Okay, thank
You
you.
would close the loophole and put them through the process.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at.
So can you point specific, what is the specific loophole?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
without
my
the-
question. What
Without all
is-
the other
Sure.
process stuff, this
Yeah.
very specific loophole.
So it's right there in the first part of the bill. If right now, a privatization contract is defined by a reduction in force of at least one position or one vacant position. So what does the administration do? They either reduce the force before they issue the contract, which is what happened with the mental health system, and led to years of, it's still going on now, people lined up in emergency rooms because we didn't have enough services. So they get rid of the employees first, then they do the contract. So that's one example. Or they augment existing services with private contractors. So reach up case managers are a good example of that. We have a massive demand. So you have reach up case managers. You're going to hear from folks in DCF, a member from DCF, who are doing the casework, sitting next in a state building next to somebody from Creative Workforce Solutions, a so-called nonprofit, doing the exact same work, and not protected by a contract, doesn't have just cause, doesn't have whistleblower protection, doesn't have the same negotiating power that the union has. And it's not a member of, it's weakening the union because that person, according to our members, should be a state employee in the bargaining.
Okay, so it's basically line 16 through 18 on page 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the part
Okay.
that is really the biggest.
See you this one second. Senator, what did your question get answered?
Yes, I guess my question, but you kind of touched on it, was about the workers' compensation privatization. And from what I heard, you don't have the answer, which is what have the savings been? But it sounds like we don't actually.
Yeah, I mean, our calculation just in year one, we just looked at year one, in the first, and I think they may have changed contractors since then. I'm not 100% sure of that. I think the savings was 7%, from our calculation, and they promised,
Yeah,
a lot of 10%.
No.
But you're on to Senator Clarkson's point in terms of quality of services. What you're going to hear from state employees is the quality of the service from the private contractor is substantially reduced from the time that we had state employees.
Yes.
And, essentially the idea there was to try to get a network of doctors that would say no to every claim. And that's basically what they've done.
Yeah, well, I do just want to reiterate, because as someone who was legislating during COVID, and received many a lot of feedback about that, I completely agree with you on the quality point and the conversational tone of trying to get someone to not finish the process. And I don't think that is worth the savings that we received. That's not the reason I asked the question. The reason I asked the question is I wanted to know the answer in the out years. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that's not something that is available.
It could be available, I guess, through the administration. It's not something the BSEA has, but
Okay, so
I think what Steve was referring to is workers' compensation, and what you're referring to, I think,
yes,
is
okay.
unemployment
Yes, I
compensation.
think you
They're
are
two
mixing
different
up.
systems.
Oh, so they didn't just privatize when we went into that, they also privatized. Okay,
We
so
have not
Workers'
privatized.
compensation is when you injure yourself on the job, and you can get workers' compensation for like falling down the stairs of the state house. Falling down the stairs of the state house.
Oh, so this isn't the unemployment insurance
No,
situation?
this is a
Oh,
different
but they
thing.
did privatize that as well. I
They
thought
brought in
those-
additional call
They just started
services
working
from outside of the state, yeah. so-
Okay, thank you very much,
Yeah.
because that is my point of confusion. I thought, okay,
but to your
but
point,
I heard a lot about that.
what our members will say, John may have from the Economic Services Division may have some thoughts about it as well, but from the Department of Labor's perspective, what we heard from our members there, even when we heard when the exchange was coming online and people had a lot of healthcare questions, Maximus was hired to take calls.
Yeah.
And the issue that our members experience is that Maximus doesn't have the same level of expertise or knowledge
Yeah.
that Vermont employees have. And so your constituent calls, thinks they're talking to a state employee, pours their heart out, trying to cook dinner, kids screaming, tells them the problem. And the person says, I'm gonna have to transfer you. If they don't give that advice, they may have to say, I have to transfer you to a state employee who now gets the brunt of your frustration.
Oh, who just had.
Because you just were put through this nightmare with Maximus.
Uh,
They have to unpeel the onion and figure out how to actually help
That's a
you.
whole nother.
So
issue.
it goes to the quality issue. Our members find that extremely demoralizing because, they understand people are very upset and they start yelling at them and it's the long waits and all that stuff. All because we aren't competitive in the marketplace in order to attract state employees who would answer the phone and be able to help you right away.
I get what you're saying. Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
You knew exactly where I was wrong.
No, we were trying, it's a typical confusion between the two
Yeah.
systems, yeah, so you weren't wrong. Senator Watson.
Thank you. I think I understand this, but I want to make sure that I do, which is that for that second example that you gave where people in parallel doing the same job, that's not a privatized, according to current definition, it's not a privatization contract because it didn't reduce anybody's job.
Right.
It was just, we needed more people, so we added
Yeah.
more through this other contract.
Yeah.
Um,
They're called personal services contracts. So that from our perspective, it's a private contract because it's a private entity doing it. It augments the existing workforce. And what we're saying is, no, you should grow the existing workforce, not augment it with private entities.
Okay.
okay.
I think we're gonna have to move on because
Thank you.
we're gonna hear from two employees, both Clarkson.
I'd just like to go to the 7% with the workers' comp outsourcing. What has been the follow-up on that? I wish I. And who followed? What's the accountability for that? And if that's reviewed, why isn't it automatically brought back into?
So we would say this bill is our follow-up on that. But ultimately, it's the Secretary of Administration, and the Attorney General and the Auditor, who I think would have some various levels of responsibility.
Right, so has the auditor followed up on this at all?
Sorry,
Do you know if
Siri.
Doug has done anything on this?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
We can dig into that.
We
more.
asked.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let me see who else is on our next. Leona is on the screen.
Oh, Leona,
Hi, Leona, are you there? Hi.
There she is.
I do.
Yeah, it's.
Hello,
it's-
Leona.
Welcome to my.
Hi, Leona. Thanks for joining us. You were here when we introduced ourselves, yeah? Were you on the
Yes.
screen? at that point? Okay, awesome.
Trying to see if something's wrong with my camera. So sorry. I don't know if you can see me actually. 'Cause my
We can
camera is
see you just fine. You're fine.
okay.
So if you
So,
want to introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know, that'd be great.
All right, I'm gonna make it short and sweet. So hi, everyone. I'm Leona Watt. I'm the chair of the VSEA's Legislative Committee. I work as a supervisor in the Department of Corrections in Brattleboro currently, and I've worked for the state of Vermont for nearly 20 years come July. I am testifying in support of S96, which is VSEA's #1 legislative priority this session. Our members are concerned about their own job security. As taxpayers, they want to ensure that workers are not exploited by contracting with private entities that save money in their name by paying lower wages with inferior benefits. We should not be trying to save money on the backs of workers, neither for state employees nor entities they contract with. As a long-term employee of the Department of Corrections, I am particularly concerned about our use of private prisons and our contract with CoreCivic. This legislation would not prohibit such a contract, but it would set some standards that protects the workers at that facility by ensuring that they are compensated in a comparable manner as our employees would be in Vermont, and that they have certain employment protections like whistleblowing protections that are critical in a correctional facility. This law will also ensure that there is accountability for one of the most profitable corporations in our nation. It would ensure that this is a good deal financially for Vermont taxpayers and that CoreCivic lives up to state and federal regulations and laws, especially as they pertain to non-discrimination and workplace safety. Thank you.
Thank you. That was short and sweet. I really appreciate that. Have you submitted that to Olivia, our committee assistant? Could you?
I will.
Okay, Steve is in the room and he says that he will make sure that Olivia gets it so it can be posted. So that would be great to have on our website. Thank you so much, Leona. Really appreciate your time and your work for the Department of Corrections. You're doing really important and difficult work. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Question, given how quick she was.
Yes, quick question.
Okay, given that you're our queen of corrections, can you just give us a notion of how you've seen the impact of healthcare, the privatization of healthcare in the prisons?
This is being recorded, isn't it?
You have to be blunt. That bad.
It's been challenging, right? Yes.
It's very challenging. I think in the field in particular, we see it when we are doing hospital coverage, and we just have sometimes questions about how did it, well, yes, it has been very eye-opening, and I am hopeful for the future that if this legislation passes, it would ensure that some of those employees who are privately contracted will be held to the same standards, and those employees receive the same benefits, so they feel good going to work when they know that they're being paid and receiving the same benefits as the state employees. Because I think that type of mindset can affect the type of work you do, and I do believe it does affect the type of work they do.
Well, Leona, thank you so much for your testimony and again, for the work you do. We'll get it set up on our website. So appreciate your time today. Take care.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, John Kennedy. John, thank you for your patience with us.
I did not submit my statement, but I can after.
Excellent.
Here for you.
Thank you for anticipating that question.
So, my name is John Kennedy. I'm a supervisor in the Economic Services Division with ECF. I live in Addison County. I work in the Middlebury District Office, and I've worked in ESD for just over 10 years now. I'm here in my capacity as the chair of the Labor Management Committee with ESD. And so my goal today is to voice support for S96 and to also share with you concerns I've heard from our members as the labor management chair. S96 doesn't prohibit private contracts or privatization contracts, but it does add some common sense guardrails, improves accountability for the taxpayers, and the bill does go a long way to reassure state employees that their jobs are secure and that the Vermonters they serve will be served well. Our top concerns, and you guys are lucky, I've just got a few here I want to run by you, and then I can get out of here. Top concern I've been hearing about from our members is the loss of state jobs to private contractors, repetitive services, frustration over doing all that hard work with our families, building trust and relationships, and then overturning that to private contractors. Overcoming obstacles only to turn it over to a private entity that they're just interested in reporting numbers to make them look successful, maybe not the actual success of the family outcome. The lack of training and familiarity with Vermont, our policies and the people we serve, as well as high turnover by contracted employees, resulting in a lack of vital consistency. Often our members feel like this situation creates more work for state employees anyway. Sitting next to contract employees who do the same job we do, in the same office, feels to our members like an attempt to circumvent the union. Our members feel these contracted employees should be state employees, protected by the contract, paid the same for the same work. And the last piece here is the breaking of critical relationships with our clients to those private contractors. That state employees have worked, in some cases, many years to nurture and grow. So S96 wouldn't solve all these concerns. The administration could still seek to privatize state services, but this bill could slow the pace and demand accountability by contractors. It would make sure that we aren't losing our jobs or watching our state government exploit workers who are often paid less for doing the same work we do every day. That's
Great, thank you. Senator White?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the work that you do, in part because I have been the beneficiary of your department and in fact, very directly ran for office because I believe that we need to protect the social safety net. Just as a foundation, so you know who I am, and why I really do value your work. My question is, when you're in these situations with, and maybe you're not directly, I want to be careful because you are an employee and I don't want you to have to share information that is,
You can't.
yeah, exactly. I got in trouble in another committee for asking some questions maybe I should have asked of employees. Do you feel that the vacancy savings that are seen in your department are being used as a tool for budgeting? Or do you think that they're because the workforce itself is not able to meet the demand of your department? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you think it's a purposeful choice that they're making, or is it something?
I guess I'm gonna say that I'm
I don't
not
know
sure,
if we can-
it's not a question for him, because it's, I don't wanna put you in an awkward position.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
how to
really-
ask the question.
No,
in a way
your
that-
question is really clear, Senator. I just am a little concerned that we're putting John in a situation that is not appropriate.
Well, maybe we'll have a conversation after.
Yeah, I think that's more of a question for supervisors and
Could
for,
I direct-
budget people.
I know I asked, I think
We're gonna have
Secretary
more.
Decidy this question, and I don't, would she be the right person to ask that again? Or
Potentially, or we could have the Secretary of Administration and we could ask her that
I
question.
would love to ask. you that
Yeah,
question.
so, I'm sorry, I just didn't wanna put you in a position where you had to answer a question that wasn't really your purview.
Yeah, I could only really give you just personal
Speculation.
feelings
Yeah.
and speculation, but I couldn't really give you a solid official answer.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Your question was clear though, so we'll find somebody who can answer it. Thank you, John, for your time and for your work, especially in Millbury, thank you.
May I just clarify?
Just sure, we really need to move on.
No, I know how behind we are because I know when Barb was scheduled for it after our break. John, these are caseworkers we're talking about at DCF. What are the privatized jobs at DCF? I guess I'm just not clear on are they caseworkers?
So reach out case management work is being done by contractors partially, and also during COVID, since our housing phones have been out of control, so they did contract out phone service.
Phone answering, so the initial point of contact is with somebody who's not a state employee.
For housing, for a sizable 50%, I believe is.
So 50% of the people answering the phones with people who are desperate with questions about their housing are now being answered by people who can't necessarily answer the questions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you get like in the mail, it says Maximus on it. Like, what is that? That looks like,
That's a private company.
yeah, but that's wild to me. That's what you get in the mail, is a folder that says Maximus on it. I thought it was like a magazine. That doesn't make any sense that we're doing that.
Okay, I'm gonna give Senator Bielanski the last word and then we really need to move on. It's crossover week, people, so.
But this is important.
So in the instances where you have a private contracted entity answering those initial calls that may not be able to answer, and maybe you have the data on this, or maybe Steve does, do you notice that the process for the person getting the services they need has slowed down or is less efficient?
From my perspective, it's not so much the speed as it is the quality of the interaction and how much work it might generate down the road for public workers.
So efficiency, yes, speed, maybe not.
Right.
Quality, yes.
Well, yeah.
Okay, we are gonna come back to this bill on Thursday, so, I hear your questions, I hear that you want, more, information. So we will, thank you, John, really for your work and for your testimony today. And if you could send it to Olivia, that'd be great.
Sure.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna take